Among the flora and the fauna, beneath the branches who want to love ya, among the many souls who drive and lose control and stumble into a secret right under your nose.
Blessings, fellow weird and wild ones. My name's Goddess, aka G, aka your friendly neighborhood witch. They, them, their pronouns, please and thank you, point blank, period. Thank you for joining me in the practice of finding our way back to wholeness. This is our temple, our playground, our life, and our truths. During our audio session together, I will be talking with my village on how we are healing, changing paradigms, and decolonizing and degendering the mind. You are not alone. You are enough. Let's plant these divine seeds together. This work is for the collective from me, and there's a lot of magic that goes on behind the scenes. Find ways to support and reciprocate me and the other co-creators on the show at the links below. Grab your pens and paper, grab your woes, and let go.
Among the flora and the fauna, beneath the branches who wanna love ya.
Shout out and big thank you to a dear friend of mine, Lori Amadeo, for sharing her track Radiate Out with us. Check it out on the SoundCloud link below. Before we get started on the episode today, I wanted to let the viewers know that we will be talking about self-harm and suicidal thoughts. And also, something we didn't mention because we were so wrapped in our conversation is that Zayn is an actor on a pretty popular Black lesbian YouTube series called New York Girls. So if you want to check him out there, I'll put the link below. Thank you for joining us today, Zayn, and sharing space to talk about divine connection. Can you share a bit about yourself and your background with your spiritual journey?
Yeah, hi. My name is Zayn. Thanks for having me. My pronouns are he and him, and the reason why I connect my trans identity and my religion or my belief together is because I'm born in Brooklyn, from Brooklyn. Been practicing Christian my entire life. My family is heavily integrated into the Christian faith in New York, and it's been a part of everything I've done. I identified as a lesbian when I was younger, but realized that I was not a lesbian, that I was in fact transgender. And through that, everything in my life changed. The ministry that I had, the ministry I was working towards, my faith in God, my connection with my home church, my connection with my family was shifted in a negative way. And so through that, I spent a lot of my time reflecting and being depressed and suicidal and searching for myself or searching for God in places that I didn't think he would be. And eventually I came to the terms with going through with a transition and coming out to my family. It was pretty tough, but through that I found a lot about myself. I found out a lot about myself spiritually, and that allowed me to create Transalike, which is an online presentation or platform that I have for trans youth to be able to find people that look like them, or that have gone through the same things as them, whether it was through faith or through their transition. And I use that platform to speak at schools and speak at churches, to do workshops for pastors and for patrons on how to treat your trans patron, or vice versa. I also do workshops with parents and children on how to go through a transition if you're a Christian family or an in-faith family that might not be for the trans community. And currently right now I work with like GC2B and a lot of other trans organizations, HR Human Rights Campaign as well. I work at Kickstarter, do trans advocacy there. I work with a lot of spaces in order to help create safer spaces. And so yeah, now I'm here talking to you.
um, here you are. Uh,
Yeah.
it's so important that you're doing the work within the Christian faith, because I think for a lot of people who identify as trans or queer or anything that I think is othered by like
Hmm.
mainstream religion, is they feel kind of alienated and disconnected um,
Yeah.
from that part of their journey. Me personally, I grew up in
Yeah.
a heavily Christian faith. It was very different than Christianity, but like similar. So I can't wait to like get into this more with you. But before we kind of delve more into your journey and what we're creating today, can you share? You shared your pronouns, but could you share the race and ethnicity that you embody? For me, I am black-bodied, and my pronouns are they, them, there.
Yeah, I'm black-bodied. I do identify with Latinx because it's a huge part of my culture, but I identify as black-bodied. And yeah, he, him pronouns.
Okay. All right. And for our check-in, in this moment, where do you feel like a divine presence or connection in your body?
I would say my chest. I was actually thinking that as we were talking. I was as we were like just like that meme where you're like walking around because you're on the phone. That's what I'm doing right now. So I was like, but I feel really good in my chest, and I was actually holding my chest, like passing myself peace as I was talking and sharing. Um, so yeah, I would say my chest.
That's like this is the heart space, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I feel it in like my left side, particularly like my core area of the left side, and then like up through my
Okay,
head and like out through my left hand. Um,
that's nice.
and yeah, yeah. So, okay, can you tell us some like pivotal moments of when your queerness and your connection with God like intertwined?
Yeah, and I was just gonna say the spot that you said on your leg, that's where I gave myself my shot the other day, so that's funny.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, yeah, it was my left leg day.
Like your
Um,
T shot?
yeah.
Yeah. Word.
But the most significant moment for me, where my faith in God and my transness intertwined was the day that I believe God saved my life. And I was working for a tech company, and I was about, I think I was 23, turning 24, and um, I was extremely suicidal that week. Like that, I had already been through like 3 years of not attending my home church and like had coming out, and I cut my hair and I just looked masculine, and but it wasn't that I didn't feel comfortable, but it felt like it came too soon, and like sooner than I was ready for. And I because of that, I lost a lot of connections with my family, whether it was their fault or my fault. I don't know what it was, but the connection was gone. And I had gotten to a really dark place, and um I was at the point in my life where I had decided that, everyone in the Bible is basically suicidal. I mean, everybody's always saying, I mean, all the Psalms are basically David saying, kill me, and I'm depressed. And so I was like, so suicide is okay. Like, it's not against my religion, and I can do it. And so I wrote a letter out, and I said, like, this is going to be my last day. And um, I was hoping that someone would find it in my, my house where I lived with my siblings. And I went to work, and I have prayed in the bathroom in my job, and I was like, if you're gonna really show me who you are, if you are someone at all, you'll do it today, and you'll do it with someone that I've never met before, and you'll have them say something very specific to me. And I was like, and if you don't, then I know what I have to do, and I just know that this was for nothing. And so like a couple hours into my shift, we had this new manager that everyone had like talked bad about, but I'd never met them. And so she came up to me and I had piercings all over my face and like tons of jewelry on. And she saw this cross necklace I was wearing and she asked me if I believed in God. And I told her, yeah, I did. And she was like, it's so weird. I had a dream about you last night. And I was like, you've never seen me before. And she was like, yeah, well, can I talk to you? And so she pulled me aside and she was like, I know I'm not supposed to do this. This is like, against, like company policy to be talking about religion and stuff. But she's like, in my dream, I had to tell you that I'm a Christian mom and my son is transgender. She's like, I don't know if you know what that is, but I'm supposed to tell you it's going to be okay with your mom. And that was literally what I had prayed about. I had said like, I wanted my biggest guilt and shame was that my mother wasn't going to be proud of me. And that to me killed me more than anything in life. And so I prayed that someone would say that to me. And I'm like almost crying thinking about it right now because I couldn't believe that someone intervened in my life in that way. I had never experienced a miracle like that or something, a divine connection to that extent. And I like just broke down crying and I, decided I was going to kill myself and I came out the next day and I continued my journey from there. So that's why I like to share my story because a lot of trans folks, are really traumatized by the church and by God, not realizing that their relationship with God is, within themselves and it's not connected to the relationship that they have with the church.
Mm-hmm. When you say that, it reminds me of something my mom used to say when she was going, actually her whole entire experience basically with the church I grew up in was bad, but she would say that same thing of like my connection with God, or she calls him Jehovah, it's
Jehovah.
it's not about what's going on within the church. It's about my connection with him. And if I can keep that, then I am connected and I will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that because it's a very personal and intimate part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also very powerful what you were saying because something someone just said to me, they're a Sangoma. I came to them with the same fear that you
Mm-hmm.
brought up with your mom about if I start this deeper connection with my ancestors, I'm afraid that they will not accept that I'm queer and that I'm non-binary, and I'm not able to hold that right now. Like it will destroy me. And she said something. She said, if it's in you, then it's in them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was this huge, like, whoo, like it's this isn't something new. This isn't a new experience for our lineages and our people. And so you're not alone. And I think that your boss was letting you know that you're not alone. Like you have, the divine connection with God and it's within you, but also your family and your ancestors, they see it too. They might not always be ready.
No, for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, they see it too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you when she told you that, what has like the connection with did you notice like a shift with your mom when like after that happened, or like maybe even a shift within how you viewed the relationship with your mom after that moment?
Yeah. Well, me and my boss became really close. Actually, I don't work there anymore, but we became really close. And she became a mom figure for me between the beginning of my transition because her child had transitioned and not really included her. And so it was like we were two puzzle pieces, like she wanted the experience of like being a parent, and I needed a parent figure with me during that time. So we gained a strong bond, and she really encouraged me to build a relationship with my mother, which was it wasn't a harmful relationship. It just wasn't really existent. And yeah, now me and my mom are best friends. Like we talk. We were just on the phone prior to this call. We talk every day.
Oh.
Yeah, she's become a very important person in my life. Yes.
So do you feel like now that you can bring more of like your whole self to that relationship, is that it's strengthened the bonds and the intimacy with your mom?
Yeah. It's and this is something I definitely um try to, if I could say one piece of advice to trans youth, that do have parent figures in their lives, biological or not. I really try to get them to have a little patience with them, and not folks that are violent, obviously, but folks that just really don't understand, like folks that like my parents. I don't believe my mom was ever harmful to me as a child. I just think that she just did not understand what I was going through, and she lost her mom when she was very young, when she was 11. So, you know, uh, I think expecting our parents that we know, or the people that are there for us that we know, are kind-hearted, like expecting them to just understand everything. I think I don't want to. I'm not saying it's selfish. I just think it's not realistic, And I've realized that through the patience that I've had with my parents throughout this whole process has been the key to our relationship. Now I share things with her that I've never would have shared with her when we did have good moments, or I never would have imagined that I would tell her all of my secrets, like things that I'm like almost ashamed of. Um, I am my most vulnerable with my mother, so um, it's extremely rewarding. But I understand, and because of how I experienced it, that it's hard as a 16 or 15 or even 13-year-old to imagine that you could have a very healthy relationship with your parent, and like a wholesome relationship, if they don't accept your identity in the beginning, or at all.
Yeah, I'd like to keep talking about that specifically because I think it's a part of
Mm-hmm.
that conversation of, stepping into your divineness and your connection with God is
Mm-hmm.
like when we start realizing our whole selves, it's a
Mm-hmm.
very spiritual and intense act. It's almost like
Yeah.
a rite of passage. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but we also really like, in order to nurture that, we need it to be mirrored back in like our environment. And so it's really hard when your family, first of all, if you don't know and you're coming into your knowing, they don't always know either, whether they choose to ignore the signs or they just don't know what to look for. And so it just isn't,
Yeah.
like a part of their common ideologies. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it is important, I think, to like take note of how they respond because it's deeply a part of your own care too. Um, like like
Mm-hmm.
like for me and my family, like my mom, it's clear she doesn't understand, but also there's certain things that like she refuses to like do when I ask like using my correct pronouns and my like name. And that's such a deep part of like the love and respect I have for myself that I've had to like distance. But I also see
Yeah.
where you're coming from because it's just a completely new concept for them. And
Yeah.
when your beliefs are kind of like rocked, and like it's shown to you by someone that you've birthed and you've known your
Mm-hmm.
whole life, it's really hard
Mm-hmm.
to adapt. But I do believe in
Yeah.
like the power of love, and that love is a part of change.
Yeah.
And if we if our practice is a loving practice, if we live our life in a loving way, then we'll be able to adapt and change. So it really is a huge balance. But I think like I hear what you're saying about like in order to not be so angry with people and like live
Yeah.
in that anger and let it fester, there has to be like a certain like understanding that like you are giving, you're presenting them with something they're just not familiar with.
Yeah, and also in my faith, respecting and honoring your parents is one of the most important and one of the most mentioned commandments, in terms of living a long life and showing honor to God, So and don't get me wrong, like me and my parents have had a very interesting relationship. I've always been like the black sheep in my family, I think, and always spoke out and questioned everything. And so I know that they definitely had a field trip, and I wasn't respectful under any circumstance when I was younger. Um, I did a lot of yelling and stuff just because I was confused about who I was, and I was confused why they were confused, and but it took a lot of me understanding my relationship with God and understanding that honoring and respecting my parents is something that I truly do believe in and do want to do. And um, because I mean, my parents' own beliefs have impacted the way they love themselves, and or the way that they educate themselves on things that they've gone through. And I just think it's, in some cases, I think it's unfair to judge someone for what they have not learned, and I hope to be that learning moment if I can. And I think some people think I'm a little too passive, but like I said, if you feel safe enough to stretch, and you could be an educational moment for someone in your own community, especially as close as a relative, I think it's worth taking if it doesn't physically harm you.
Yeah.
You know.
Like a bridge builder almost. You talked about
Yeah.
before like certain scriptures that you like, so
Hmm.
if you're coming from a Christian family, that you can share with your family that like support uh being queer or trans. Can you share
Yeah.
a little bit about that? Because I think that is about like if we're coming to our family out of respect and love for both ourselves and them, it's
Hmm.
honoring the space and like this is a learning moment for us both. And like let's walk through this together. And I like how you put that. So like can you share some of the scriptures or like ways of presenting it to Christian families?
Yeah. Well, so my mom, she was the person I really focused on because her faith, even when we didn't have a good relationship, was of great mass to me. I just think that she's such a faithful person in God, and I I knew that she would, if she didn't understand how I was feeling and didn't know the proper channels to assist me, I knew that the one thing she did understand was the Bible that she read every single morning. I've seen her my entire life at 6 a.m. While drinking coffee. I just knew that she would get that. So there was two verses that I shared because I think that they really embody what trans people mean, and how I believe that trans people don't need the church, but the church needs trans people. Um, so the first one is in Matthew chapter 19, verse 12. And it reads, "For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this receive it." And I think like just understanding what or how an openly trans person identified back then, they were sacred people in God's kingdom. Like they were people that whether, and I don't know why each person went into it. I know that there were some that were forced, through slavery, which is, I completely disagree with. But then if we're talking about trans people, people that make these decisions to physically transition, to alter themselves back then in a way that um, allowed them to get closer to God, was when I read that, was just um, it just embodied what my experience was. My physical transition was one of love because I loved my body. Like my like dysphoria was not so much physical, it was more mental, but my physical body, like if I looked at it, I loved it. I just didn't connect with it. You know, I didn't have this hate for it. I thought it was beautiful. But I, you know, decided that I just didn't connect. And in order for me to connect with myself, I need to do something that's a little outside of maybe what I have would have ever imagined in my life, you know, and that was the transition. And taking that necessary step and dedicating it to God and putting it in God's hands and entrusting that this connection now with myself was going to allow me to serve in ways that I didn't, which eunuchs would now be able to go into different spaces, like, you know, all gendered spaces, or the opposite, you know, quote unquote opposite sex to them at that time. Um, they would be able to be in those spaces, and I just think that shows a lot of courage to do that, to be, you know, isolated from society, to be in a holy place all day, if it was their choice. um, Another text that I shared was Isaiah chapter 56, and these are both in the New Testament, verses 3 to 5. For thus says the Lord to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose the things that please me and hold fast my covenant. I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. I mean, that right there just shows you God's um, love for the queer community, for trans people. I mean, eunuchs were, like we said, the isolated, the rejected, but they were so important in a few stories. They were people that served and you know, selflessly served. So um, when I shared these things with her, and me too, I was learning. You know, the first time I spoke to my mom, I shared basic things like you have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. You know, like I was like, that is the greatest commandment, the one of the two greatest commandments, and that kind of spoke to her. But when I learned more about who I was in Christ and felt comfortable reading the Bible and searching for these texts, I learned about eunuchs, and I learned what they were called and how important they were. And I just couldn't believe that there was actual text, but no one teaches about them. I've been in church my whole life and have never heard a story about a eunuch, you know?
Yeah, when you say eunuch, I remember hearing about them in the Kingdom Halls, but I don't like
Yeah.
the only thing I can remember is that they were like sexual organs on them were altered or cut off in some way, and I think I remember in the form of like slavery. Can you say more about
Yeah.
what a eunuch is?
Well, a eunuch, let me get the actual definition for it. Um, it identifies as this. This is just the actual reading of it. I wanted to read it because they're not my words, but a man who has been castrated, especially in the past, one employed to guard the women's living areas at an Oriental court. Um, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones. I mean, I'm like that's the closest I can think of like, you know, today's things. Um, you know, but they're based. I mean, you know, like I said, this is not to invalidate the experiences of slaves that were taken and forced into being castrated and used to serve. This is not to mistaken those two things. Like, I mean, they were called the same thing, but whom I'm talking about are people that chose to do these things. Because obviously the other act is, you know, completely inhumane. But eunuchs were people that, like they said, mostly it would be a what they considered a male figured person, that would be willing to serve the queen in her bathhouse or in other spaces where only women were allowed. They believe that different bodies did this across different ways, So this could have been done in different ways other than being castrated, but they resembled a specific kind of service, which, I mean, could have been used, and I'm not trying to say like they weren't used in all these ways. Like it could have been used in sexual ways, it could have been used in, I don't know, in to be harmful, but for the ways in which the people themselves decided that they wanted to dedicate themselves to God so much that they were willing to transition, or if it was because they just didn't feel comfortable with themselves and they saw that as a safe way to do that, but also required for them to have a life with God, and I think there's a lot of ways to embody that, but in the examples that I gave, I mean, these eunuchs were people that wanted to serve God, that wanted to do this, for themselves, that wanted to be in these spaces, that were comfortable doing this, that took themselves out of main society to live as their true selves. And to me, I can't imagine that that doesn't connect them to God more. I mean, they're physically altering themselves or going through a transition to be closer to God. And like I said, I relate to that so much because my transition was learning that I wanted to be truly myself and understanding that I was no longer able to go to my home church. I was no longer able to be a female minister or work on the journey that I had been my whole life. I was no longer able to connect with my family. I was losing everything. But I knew that the reward was that I was going to find myself and get closer to God. And so I can only imagine that other people in these situations have done that and have connected their transition to their relationship to God or their faith or their spirituality.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So are there any like scriptures or examples in Christianity that you know of AFAB or like assigned female at birth folks kind of being represented in that same way?
So there's eunuchs in the Bible. There's two stories with a eunuch in the Bible, and they don't really mention them much. They don't really have names. But they explain something that they've done. Like one example is that a eunuch assisted someone in rescuing like a straggler that was walking on the road that had fell in a well. But it was the eunuch at that time could have decided not to help. But they decided to help and to obey, whomever was there at that moment, and got the equipment and was able to save this person who had a message from God. So if this person had died, then that message would have never have gotten across. And so they don't have like specific details about these people. But there have been theologians and pastors and a lot of folks who have broken down this text to see how essential that person is in that moment, or how they acted. They were like angels, like people who would have not been there in that moment or were there and decided to do a good act. And so, they challenge like what was their relationship to that identity through that, you easily could let someone die if you feel that if you were enslaved, or if you felt angry, or if you were going to try to run away, but to stay and to be a part of the story, and to also be the person that was the tool to getting something from from point A to point B. It just kind of shows the significance in them being there and what connection God has to use them.
Yeah. You did mention about the church needing the trans community, and I think that speaks to what you were just talking about like if we weren't there, what would happen? So can you speak more to what you mean by this?
Yeah, I think any person who suffers, especially people of color, Black people specifically, and Indigenous folks, I mean, people that suffer with not being able to identify with themselves, being oppressed, constantly living in fear, constantly having to work harder. I think or just being rejected by the place that they're supposed to call home, or the place that they live, the place that they were born in. I know that form of resilience is extremely spiritual. I mean, most of the hymns that we sing were written by slaves during their times that I can't even imagine going through, and to know that they sang these hymns every single day, every morning. I mean, they couldn't even preach by themselves. They had, I mean, in some, cases, there had to be a white man at every at every service in church, and they still continued to give their praise. That could easily intimidate anyone, to be watched at all times, to be harmed during service in a space that's supposed to be your sanctuary. I think that kind of resilience, it just lets me know in those communities there are queer people. Queer people, just because we might not know who, if our great 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 uncle was gay or trans, it doesn't mean that they didn't exist. They definitely existed within our communities, and we still know now today how much they don't show themselves or how self they live. But everything we practice in the church is built on resilience. We believe that Jesus was this like hippie, feminine Palestinian man that stood up for people's rights, and he loves the rejected. He loves the isolated. He wanted to be with everybody else that was like hidden, as opposed to taking his identity and trying to be famous, or not famous, but trying to be profitable off of that fame. And so I just can't imagine that the church could exist without the queer community, without our input, without our form of resilience, without our identities, our intersections, without the things that we have taught ourselves, the kind of faith that we have to exist every day. Whether we believe in God or not, we have some faith in ourselves that will make it, and every time I step into a church or a space where there are no queer people, I just feel this emptiness, because when I'm around the queer community, I feel like I'm in church, and then when I go to church, I feel like kind of like the loser in the lunchroom. Like, I'm just like sitting there like by myself. Like, I can be surrounded by so many people, but I just feel empty, and not because it's not God filling me. God fulfills me completely, but that sense of community, in a lot of ways, not in my personal church right now, but in a lot of churches that I visited, it just feels, I don't know. It just feels like something's missing, and I can only pray and hope that these two dots will connect at some point. But as of right now, the church needs the trans and queer community. They need them to educate them and to help them build the kind of resilience that we need to be in the world. Saying that we believe in this magician.
I love how you said that about when you're with, your queer community, you feel like you're at church. Because I totally agree with that when I'm with, my fellow queer folks, specifically like BIPOC queer folks. Like, it feels as if I am so seen and can be so myself, and like to celebrate that with people that celebrate it alongside you and understand your journey is a part of the like divine experience that when I feel connected to the divine, to creator, this web that I call the being that the thing that creates us,
Yeah.
it feels seen. You feel so seen. There was a summit that I hosted last weekend, and a part of it was called Queering Spirituality, but a part of it was talking about that what what you were just talking about acknowledging that queer folks have been a part of, religious groups and spiritual practices since forever, since humans were in existence.
Yeah.
And it's important to honor their stories and what they have to share with um, in spiritual spaces, because it gives us perspective on how to, even if we are cis or hetero, it gives us perspective on how to tap in to that connection with divine in a way that we might be missing. And so I encourage everyone, um, whatever practice, spiritual practice you're accessing, to find QT BIPOC people who are also practicing in that faith, and learn from them, because they will bring things to you that will strengthen your faith. Yeah, I'm really glad that Shay. Yeah. I'm really glad that you said that. Yeah. How have you found kind of a balance between teaching in spiritual groups and bringing a very vulnerable part of yourself to your faith, while also gaining nourishment? So doing emotion, making a space for emotional labor and physical labor to teach, but also not given knowing when okay, I need something back now. I need
I know. Yeah, it I hate that I sound so cliche all the time, but it really is my relationship with God. I believe God gives me the strength to do everything that I do, and it feels like my purpose, it is my purpose, I believe, to be here and to speak to trans and queer youth, and to educate anyone around me on God loving them, because I think that we have for so many years spent so much time hearing the opposite of that message, and it needs to be heard. It's hard. I'm not gonna lie. It's been, I mean, over quarantine especially has been extremely hard. I think it's been the worst. I mean, not the worst, the most work that I've done, and but making sure that I get up at 6 a.m. and I read my Bible and I pray for that hour, or I talk to God throughout the whole day. About 5 times a day I pray. I have to make sure that I'm taking those moments to nourish myself. I have to do it throughout the day, because I'm constantly doing it on my social media, within my friends. If I'm talking to someone outside, I take any moment to talk about God, or wear my cross necklace, or as you said, all my clothes that have God on it. Everything I do is God related. So I try to, I do it in a very not trying to convert you kind of way, because that's not what it is. I don't believe that I can convert anyone. I just know that it's my duty to share the message if the person feels safe in that conversation. And so that's why I work on the safety of the conversation, knowing that I am open to everything, and I love to hear about other people's beliefs, and I love to just connect as people. So that the understanding that I'm having interactions that are valuable and that are enriching for me as a person to, learn more deeply about another person, that keeps me going. And like I said, God definitely keeps me going for sure. Because sometimes I'm I know I wouldn't be doing this on my own strength. I'm tired,
Yeah. It's interesting you said that, because I think years ago, I would have when you said I love just talking about God, so I would be like, oh God, no.
No, I know.
I mean, you're Christian, and I'm a witch, but honestly, I see that in how I handle human interactions too, as well. Is I am so excited and gain so much nourishment from talking about connections with like nature and my divinity that like I can see the like I don't want to call it proselytization, but like definite like let's go there kind of like
Yeah.
language that they use. And I definitely notice when like people don't want to go there. And like I'm like, okay, I respect
Hmm.
that. Like we don't have to go there. But I also notice like when like if people don't want to like talk like about those things with me, they're probably not my kind of people. And so I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
same,
cool.
same.
It was like nice interacting, but like I'm
Yeah.
gonna go like I don't know, dancing with moonlight with like some other folks.
Yeah, I mean, all of my friends are atheists for the most part. I have two friends, two close friends that believe in God, but most of everyone I've ever been best friends with or close friends with have been atheists and tell me, from the very beginning that they're atheists. But I have the most spiritual conversations with them all of the time. And it's, it's so it's like it's never like a like I'm not trying to make like a Jehovah Witness joke, but like all the memes are there like, knocking on your door. Like I'm not doing that, but I definitely am like want it to be a part of the conversation because I want to understand how other people perceive God. Because it's not just about my relationship with God. It's like I want to know what your relationship is and like how you feel about it and like what do you think about God? I'm always curious as to what people think who God is. I think God is, the bee's knees. So I'm just like I'm always curious. Yeah, I'm just curious as to like what other people think.
Yeah, you know what? I resonate with that because a lot of my friends, or like I wouldn't say a lot, I would say some of my friends are like still in like more organized forms of religion, and I've had beautiful conversations with them about what God is. And it's that same curiosity of like, how do you connect with your divinity? And that's why I wanted you to come on the podcast because we are so vastly different, and like our
Yeah.
how we connect with divine. And I think it's important to have those conversations and like it be shown that it can happen and like it's
Yeah.
totally okay. Okay, so now I'm curious, like how, yeah, when you, yeah, like how do you perceive God, or how does
Um,
he come to you, or they come?
I'm like I just like stared. I was like, oh my God, what do I say? I felt like so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, what do I say about you? Um, I like yeah, I am in love with God. Like I love God in this way that's like not romantic as in a sexual way, like in a deeply intimate way that I know it's like how every gospel song you hear could like be like a love song, like it's
Mhm.
but it's not a love it's not a sexual song. It's like I'm just in love with you, like with who you are. Like if you could just imagine meeting someone where you loved everything about them, every single thing, like, and not that you got annoyed, like it's not like the things like they chew with their mouth open and it drives you crazy. It's like they this huge thing can happen in my life that I believe basically you're the director of, and I still love you the same as if it was something that was a miracle. It's understanding that I I finally have a true relationship with someone where they understand everything about me and so much that they created me and they also allow me to be here as many days as I've been, and they love me, and I just I don't know, I just feel it's almost overwhelming every time I think about it to imagine that someone loved me so much they saved me on that day. They saved me even though I was like cursing at them and saying like you don't exist, and saying like how I'm going to take this thing that this, and I'm not like shaming anyone that like has taken their own lives. Like I truly believe that everyone's mental health is extremely uh top priority and number one thing, and every like choices are choices. Like it has nothing to do with that. Like I'm just talking about my personal experience, like for me, and what I believe my life means from my creator. um, it To think that I was going to take something at a time that it was not met was really, I don't know, it hurt me to think that I hurt someone that loved me so much, that showed me love in so many ways, even within myself, you know. So I don't know. I think God is just my whole life, everything. I would die in the name of my religion. I would do anything that I felt was, you know, of good deed in the name of my religion, in the name of my belief or my love for Christ or for God.
Mm. Um, do you like when you are conversating with God, do they come to you? Like, do you see them, or like, what do they like look like?
I don't. I have never seen like an image, you know, of God. I truly believe in seeing God in different people, and I think that's why I'm so curious and always asking people what they, you know, like about themselves. And I think it's that moment where my spirit connects with them, that moment where I'm like, this is the kind of person I believe that you are, or that I feel that you are. It's like a feeling more than something visual, you know. So I would say I see God in people all the time, but when I'm praying, yeah, I definitely believe, you know, I believe that I have the Holy Spirit in me. So that is a piece of God that God left with me, and so I definitely feel that for sure, 100%. I mean, I feel that in so many ways throughout the day, like almost like almost feels like a conscious, like a, I don't know, like I would say like the angel on the side of your, you know, on your shoulder. Like if I'm walking somewhere and I just feel like it's not safe, like sometimes I feel my Holy Spirit saying, you can't go there, like don't go there. And I'll just turn and I'll just go another way, you know, like I feel it in so many ways. But when I'm praying, um, it's not all the time, but when it's like, you know, that prayer that you just like crying and and you're just like, you really need God to answer that prayer. I believe God always comes through for me, and I feel it in those moments, or when I'm just, you know, heavily meditating. It's
Mm.
random. Hmm.
Yeah, I I experience these same things, but like I have different words for them. It's so interesting. Yeah, I love
Hmm.
that we're talking about this because like I also see I believe that like God isn't like a separate entity, but like we're all a part of like the this web that is
Hmm.
creation and nature and the forces that allow us to continue. And that's all things.
Yeah.
And so when I see creator or like this force in other people, that's when I'm like, boom, like that's like you were saying, like that's when I see God. Like like have you ever been
Yeah.
like walking down the street and you decide to like fully be in your body and fully own who you
Hmm.
are and your beauty, and you look up and you see someone else looking at you and you both smile at each other. That is freaking it, and that's like the reminder, like we're all mirrors of
Yeah.
divinity for each other. So I see it in that way too, and like creating and honoring and like I like when I say creating, like rebirthing the power that is this web, this transformation, and like having conversations with other people about what God is, what creator is, what this like force
Hmm.
is, like continues like it's like storytelling and in tradition, like our traditions, like we must
Yeah.
keep talking about it in order for this to carry on and pass like
Yeah.
from one generation to another, and so that it stays strong.
Hmm.
So I totally get that. And when you say like Holy Spirit, so Holy Spirit, when I was growing up, it was something like we like and then I might be wrong about this, but from what I remember, like we did like Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in like the Holy Spirit in a way of like it's in you, like that's too much
Yeah.
like having like being possessed by something. But it's been a hot minute since I've been in the Kingdom Hall. Um, but now what I notice is that like that felt like a complete like disconnection from being in yourself and like knowing yourself and feeling a true connection with divine. And so now when I think of Holy
Mm-hmm.
Spirit, I think of like you were saying, like that intuition of like, you shouldn't go there, or like truly listening to what my compass tells me. Because, you know, if we're all being held in this web and a part of this web, then the web will like give us like certain signs when we're acting against it, or something like in our path is like acting against it. So it's
Yeah, that's it. No, that's what it is. Yeah.
yeah. I know, I actually have had an experience where I had a psychotic break like 5 years ago and got in a car
Mm-hmm.
accident. And that
Oh
was the
no.
first, yeah, it was not the greatest of experiences, but it was also the most beautiful of experiences, because you can
Uh-huh.
have both. But um I connected with Jesus, and like a second I felt as if I were Jesus, and I completely
Mm-hmm.
understood. I understood that idea of giving yourself, um because you love others so much, and you realize
Mm-hmm.
by sacrificing yourself, you're not actually sacrificing your entire self, because you live on. um
Mm-hmm.
it's just this one part of you that's a very great part of you, but is a temporary part of you. And realizing that
Yeah.
and being able to let go, allows you to open up to so many other possibilities, and gives other people the chance to open up to other possibilities
Mm-hmm.
too. And so
Yeah.
that
That's
resonates.
that's beautiful.
Yeah, that totally resonates. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
And the day of Pentecost is coming soon too.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You remind me so much of Rumi.
What?
So much of Rumi, so much of Rumi. So when like you also like mentioned before, going into churches, like churches that you haven't been in before, and like outing yourself to see how they react, in order to, like you said, like be the like do what you feel like you were born to do, and be kind of like a guide and like a gauge and like a safe pathway for other trans folks and queer folks.
Yeah.
um like, is there a way to kind of for people to access like or find like a database of like the churches that you feel like have been like a safe haven for like the queer trans community?
Yeah, so there are two. I'm actually working on a project on that, on like how to present that. But as of like right now, the things that I am sharing right now, the church that I go to does a virtual, service every week. And they are an extremely queer friendly church. They're not it's the first Presbyterian Church of Brooklyn. It's not a queer church, but they have a calling for queer people. Like there are so many queer folks at that church, and they actually allow queer people to minister, to participate, which is a huge thing, because there are churches that say they accept, queer folks, and they do. They let them in, and they let them give money every Sunday or Tuesday or Friday, but they don't let them minister. They don't let them participate, no matter how dedicated they are. They're just kind of there as like almost a privilege, but it's an open space. I mean, so my church right now is doing it. Obviously because of quarantine, I haven't been able to complete the list, but the list is almost done, and it's going to be presented in a project that I will release about a month or two. But yeah, I can definitely provide the link. I'll send it to you, but it's spc.church, and when you can go Sundays 11 a.m. Eastern time, and you can enjoy service, and you can feel loved, and you can feel present, and you can feel prayed for, and cared for, and you can enjoy your um, spirituality in your own space. We're going to be rolling out programs in June for an entire year dedicated to the queer community, focused on trans people, trans bodies and text, trans identities and spirituality, and educating cis folks on, just like trans education if they would like to attend. So once I have the information for that, it's launching in June, but once I have like the links and stuff for that, I'll definitely pass it along if you want to share.
Yes, that would be great. I'll put it in the show notes so that people who are listening to this in the future can like access that and have it as a resource.
Yeah,
definitely. And I'm so curious of like what that like conversation. I'm like, can I join? Because there's so many texts in the Bible that like I don't resonate with anymore. But it would be nice to find like people who are discussing those texts, and like how they make peace with them, because I haven't found that peace yet. And like I guess my peace is that like the Bible was written by multiple people and from like multiple experiences, and so some of it is probably not going to be like the most, I don't know, connected with the divine that it could be.
Yeah.
But
you could join these conversations for sure.
Because I would.
No, for sure, we want people to come in. Yeah.
Okay, because I would love to hear from like the perspective of people who still like follow that the biblical text, like what their relationship is to it, because I think that's really important. Okay.
Yeah.
So like how does your like, well, like, okay, actually let me back up for a second. So when you dream when you dream of your ideal church, what do gender, race, and sexuality look like there? Because you're creating a space yourself, and so I'd love to talk about that more.
When I dream of my, I'm sorry, I missed the word. My what church?
Your ideal church.
Oh, my ideal church. Yeah. I mean, my ideal church would really be everybody minding their own business, right? And like, and just making sure that they're practicing and praising the way that we should be doing, because that's what it really is about when you go to church. Your salvation is individual. Your relationship with God is individual. What you do, what you think, what you learn, what you don't learn, like all of those things only happen with you. They don't happen with the church. But God knows that we need other people to be, in order to succeed in this, or to, be a crutch or to lean on. We need community to survive. So that's why we have the church, So my ideal church would be that everyone is kind of focusing on themselves and loving their neighbors as they love themselves, right? Fulfilling those two commandments. But what I think that it should look like with the trans and queer community involved, or what gender looks like. I mean, I don't know, like I definitely care about my gender identity, obviously, because I'm trans, but God doesn't resemble a gender to me. I mean, I obviously believe like all femmes, especially Indigenous and Black, are God, when I look at them, but I also just think like the idea of embodying gender to God is just very, it seems large. It is large to us because it's our identities, right? Like we carry that, the weight of what gender means in this world every day. But that's because we made that weight. God didn't make that weight. Like God just made us, the way that we interact with each other, or use God's name to interact with each other is different. But when I think of God, I think sometimes I don't always say he, I say she. I interchange it a lot. I say they. I believe that they are something that I can't even begin to imagine, So I think that if I even thought that I could understand what God looks like, that would be almost insulting to what I believe God is, So I just think, I think the church looks exactly what we believed, the Garden of Eden looked like, which was peaceful, loving, caring, just people existing and praising and working together to make the praise greater, and not looking at each other's faults and like having all these dogmas and, talking about like, marriage and like sleeping with people and like, lies and gossip and like all of the things that happen in a church. Churches are filled with broken people, right? And that's essentially like when you hit your moment, right? Like when you said like you felt like Jesus in a moment where you were extremely in despair. I mean, in a huge traumatic moment that happened in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Um and that's because I believe that you need to be planted, to blossom into something. But I just think that church should resemble that garden of where you're planted at, right? Each plant is there and they're covered, but they're not interfering with each other. They're only growing together to create this beautiful image to help the community, to feed the insects, to help the environment. That's what a church is supposed to be. We're supposed to be a space that positively only impacts the community and the people around us, to share the glory of God. And so a lot of these identities, they are extremely important, but I think like in an ideal church, we would have an understanding and a vision and an alignment that our main priority is kind of like that we live to follow this mission, and through that, you just begin to love everyone. You understand their identities, and you take them into consideration, and you definitely connect with them and align with them in the ways that you can. But I think it begins with loving God first, and then you can love God's creation.
Mm, wow. Um, I'm taking in what you're saying because it sounds a lot like kind of like what we talk about in like a yoga, or like focusing on what's
Mhm.
going on your mat, like focusing what's going on in your body and what you need. Like we're all here
Mhm.
collectively and we're supporting each other energetically, but like
Mhm.
really tapping into what this experience is for you is the best way for you
Yeah.
to show up right now. Um,
Mhm.
and I think about that not in just terms of like our spiritual practice, but I guess also in terms of our spiritual practice, like how we live our lives too. And I think that
Uh-huh.
that's kind of what you're saying. Like, stop me if I'm wrong, but like that idea of um, like loving each other in a way of it not being intrusive or like overly intertwined, but
Mhm.
like living our lives, like experiencing and growing in this lived experience now,
Mhm.
alongside one another. And I think as I get older, I start to
Yeah.
I start to
Same.
appreciate
Yeah.
that
Same.
ideal more. Like I was like communal living and like let's all live in one house together. And now I'm like, I need like my own space to grow.
Yeah.
It's a part of my development as a human being of just like I need my own space, like in order
Yeah.
to really fill into who I am. And I totally I hear what you're like saying with that, like within like an intentional spiritual practice as well of like sometimes we gotta mind our own damn business. It doesn't mean that we're not here
Yeah.
for people and we're not like seeing people. Like we see one another, but we ain't touching one.
Yep.
We're like, yeah, I see where you're coming from there. Okay, so can you tell
Yeah.
us more about Transalike and what you're hoping to do there, and with your like you're becoming like a spiritual guide?
Yeah. So at the First Presbyterian Church of Brooklyn, our pastor, Reverend Adrian Thorne, um, who I actually believe was the first, I think I told you, like the first Black Rockette, or
With
one of
the
the most
first
famous
black
Black
what?
Rockettes. Yeah, I think she was the first Black one.
Oh,
There's a lot of
Rockette.
pictures of it. Yeah, Rockette. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. um, but she has been so accepting of me since the moment I met her. I scheduled a meeting with her because I was like, I outed myself in that church, and I was like, they accept trans people, and I couldn't understand why. And so I, asked if I could meet with her so I could basically interrogate her and see if she was full of it, And when I had quickly witnessed, I can't even explain how beautiful I think she is as a person. Her spirit, how kind she is. Um, uh, I, displayed interest. I told her all about me, and the same day she asked me to be involved with the LGBT ministry there. And so now, like I had mentioned, we're going to be doing this work. So I basically take, Transalike is me. It really is called Transalike so people can be attracted to the idea that maybe it's multiple people, because I know that people feel a little intimidated when it comes to like reaching out on social media. Like they can see me on social media, maybe they think I have this really cool life, so they're like, I don't want to DM him. And but I do get a lot of responses through the Transalike, which is that platform, and it was meant specifically as like that, as that comfort. But yeah, I bring all of Transalike to my church. What I do right now is every Sunday I invite trans folks to come. I do this through social media. I do this through like basically, I don't want to say harassing people, but like sending messages to everyone like, we have a service, come. And so now, beginning in June for Pride Month, like I said, we're going to be running this 1-year program where I'm going to be doing a lot of workshops on bringing trans education to that church. It was something that they felt that they needed, and I was so excited to hear that they felt that that was an opportunity, because no one would say that. No church would, say that from my experience. So I'm bringing all of my skills there and focusing in that spiritual space. So I can do both things at one time, and it'll make it'll make it a little bit easier. And also it'll give a space to any spiritual person. They don't have to be Christian practicing, like, or a follower in Christ. I want anyone that is spiritual, anyone that believes in in a higher being, anyone that believes in themselves as a higher being. Like, come with me, like come to a space where you can listen to a great choir and you can get free snacks after, and you can just be safe, and then afterwards, I do discussions. So now we're doing it on Zoom, because of quarantine. But so we have this service on Sunday, and then every Sunday after the service, I do a Zoom room where I talk to queer people and trans people and ask them how they felt, if it was their first time or their second time or even their third time in visiting our virtual service or any church service. And I kind of like ask them for feedback. And then after that session, which is about an hour long, like a safer space for them, I do a Zoom room with parents that are wanting to talk, that maybe are in the church that have trans children, or folks in the church that just want to be an ally to trans people. And so we're going to be doing these. I've been doing them loosely over the last couple of weeks, but we're going to be doing them at a more scheduled time, about 3 times a week, giving just, I guess I would say, trans 101 basics, like pronouns and stuff like that. And then also providing a space for trans masculine people specifically, and then also providing a Zoom space for trans and queer youth within different ages throughout the week. So I'm going to be doing that for the next year. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a long commitment, and there's so much that you can cover in that time. That's going to be really expansive.
I'm so excited, though. This is exactly what I've been praying for about the last 10 years of my life, and it finally came to fruition in this church that is now my home. So I am like, I'm like literally over joyful. Like I feel overwhelmed even talking about it, because I feel so blessed to even be in a situation where I can talk to trans folks about God in the house of God, whether it's virtual or not. It's just such a privilege.
Yeah, congratulations. That's huge. That's really huge. So yeah, I will definitely get the links to all of the resources that you've provided, and I'll put those in the show notes. And again, I encourage anyone listening to this that resonates, like, please reach out to Zayn. And if you have spiritual practices where you want to delve into the queerness of it and the QT BIPOC amazingness that is in different spiritual practices, like, I think that that's important too, because there's not a lot of spaces where we combine like queerness, being people of color, and also spirituality, where it's being led by people of color. And so if you like, reach out for those people. Thank you so much, Zayn.
Yeah,
I really
for sure.
Is there anything else you want to share with folks before we step into this day?
No, yeah, please feel free to reach out to me. It's zayn@transalike.com. If you want to question anything I said, or if you just want to share your opinion, concerns, you want to vent, or talk about your spiritual practice and faith, I would love to have those conversations with you. Even if you have a parent that you want to suggest, a boss, anyone. I invite all kinds of conversations because I think this is how we do that shift in the culture in terms of creating safer spaces for people like me and people like us in the queer trans BIPOC community. So yeah, so I hope everyone doesn't feel shy to like pour their hearts out to me. I'm a Scorpio, so I'm like, please tell me all your secrets. But I'm like, tell me all your traumas, please, because I want to know. But yeah. But no, thank you so much for having me and for sharing your experiences too. It's so enriching to hear your background story as well and how you practice your faith. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
So, do you like me, or do you love me? Please heart the episode, share the episode, and subscribe at sunseedcommunity.com.